Welcome to the Explainer. So, if your mind ever feels completely overwhelmed, scattered, or just generally anxious about your giant to-do list, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we are taking that anxious, overwhelmed mind and transforming it into a laser-focused, dangerous productivity machine. And we're going to do it using the science of the Getting Things Done methodology to build what's called your external brain system.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture our stickman protagonist here for a second. Right now, his brain feels exactly like a computer that's completely struggling to function because it is entirely out of RAM. Have you ever experienced that? That low-level background anxiety where you just know you're forgetting something important, but you literally cannot pinpoint what it is? It's the mental equivalent of having 100 open browser tabs, and one of them is playing audio, and you just can't find it. You're overwhelmed, you're paralyzed, and honestly, you can't get any meaningful work done.
Because think about how a laptop actually works. When it's bogged down by bloatware and a dozen background processes, the entire system just slows to an absolute crawl. So what do? You open the task manager, you uninstall the junk, and you clear out those temporary files to free up processing speed. Well, our minds work the exact same way. When we try to hold on to these massive mental to-do lists, remembering to pick up the dry cleaning, drafting that client proposal, remembering to buy milk, we are actively eating up our most precious cognitive fuel. Offloading those tasks is literally the only way to restore your mental processing speed.
And this brings us to a really foundational quote from David Allen, the guy who created the Getting Things Done methodology. He says, "Your brain is for having ideas, not storing them." The entire GTD system is built on this single, incredibly powerful premise. The mental load of trying to manually track every single task, it creates this low-level anxiety that just never fully goes away. As long as you're using your brain as a storage container, you're wasting your mental energy on administration rather than actual execution.
So what's the fix? Well, it's the external brain system. This is a trusted, completely offloaded system that you use to capture and manage all of your commitments. Imagine just doing a massive brain dump into a notebook. By moving everything out of your head and into a trusted external place, you are essentially clearing your mental cache. The instant you write it all down, that background anxiety, it just vanishes. Your cognitive bandwidth opens right up and you are finally ready to actually focus.
Section 1. The GTD Framework. 5 Steps to Clarity.
So how do we actually build this system without just creating more chaos? Because we can't just write things down randomly. We need a reliable structure to process that brain dump. Now, what's really interesting here is how simple yet incredibly rigid this blueprint is. Step 1 is capture. Literally write down absolutely every task, idea, and commitment. Just get it out of your head. Step 2 is clarify. Ask yourself, is this actionable? Can it be done in one step? Step 3 is organize. Sort those items into their proper places. Step 4 is reflect. You have to regularly review your lists to keep them current so you actually trust them. And finally, step 5 is engage. Pick your next action based on priority, context, and your current energy levels, and just do the work.
Let's look at a real-world example of those clarify and organize steps in action. Imagine an agency project manager who walks into work on a Monday completely stressed out and does a massive brain dump of 51 different items. By running them through the GTD system, the chaos instantly clarifies. Look at this breakdown. 11 items, that's 22%, get completely trashed. Boom, gone. 8 items get delegated to a waiting on list. 6 go into a someday or maybe folder. And that leaves just about half, 26 items, as actual next actions. By simply filtering out the noise, the overwhelm is completely gone, and it's replaced by a calm, confident plan for the week.
Section 2. The Obvious Trap. The Illusion of Fixes.
Now, before you run off and download 10 different productivity apps to build your system, we really need to address a massive pitfall. This is where our desire to get organized actually becomes the ultimate form of procrastination. The crucial point here is that true productivity requires simplicity, not some complex ecosystem of flashy apps. We call this the obvious target trap. It happens when you think your lack of productivity is an obvious problem that needs an obvious, complex solution, like buying a fancy new Notion template or stringing 4 different apps together. But what actually happens? One app updates, the connection breaks, and suddenly you have hundreds of lost tasks, and you just abandon the whole system. The most dangerously productive people, they rely on true simplicity. We're talking a basic calendar app, the default notes app on your phone, and physical sticky notes. Please, do not waste your cognitive bandwidth over-engineering your tools. To actively combat that urge to over-engineer, we can combine GTD with principles from a framework called Zen to Done, or ZTD. ZTD was created for this exact reason, because people were spending way too much time playing with their productivity systems and not nearly enough time actually working. The core principles here remind us to focus heavily on the doing rather than the planning. It also tells us to build these organizational habits one at a time, instead of trying to reinvent our entire lives in a single Tuesday. And above all else, keep your tools aggressively simple.
Section 3. Executing with deep focus. Tackling your tasks.
All right, so now you've got a simplified, trusted external brain, and your mind is clear. But having a clear list isn't the exact same thing as getting the work done, right? So how do we actually tackle these tasks using targeted neuroscience and biology? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the perfect morning flow, one that's designed to align perfectly with our natural biology. To get the absolute highest leverage out of your brain, you do not start by chugging coffee and staring at an inbox. First, you wake up and get into forward ambulation, literally just taking a walk outside. This generates optic flow, which lowers activity in your brain's amygdala, instantly reducing anxiety. And while you're walking, you're getting sunlight in your eyes, which triggers a healthy pulse of cortisol to naturally wake you up. Then, and this is critical, you delay your caffeine intake for 90 to 120 minutes. This prevents that dreaded afternoon crash by managing your brain's adenosine levels. That's the chemical that makes you feel sleepy. Only then do you enter your deep work block.
And that deep work block brings us to a magic number, 90. See, the brain operates on 90-minute ultradian cycles. Throughout your entire day, your brain naturally cycles from a state of high alertness down to lower alertness every 90 minutes. You absolutely cannot expect yourself to maintain razor-sharp focus for 4 hours straight. It's just not going to happen. Instead, you want to set a timer for exactly 90 minutes and push yourself into a highly focused bout of work, riding that natural wave of your biology.
Now, to make those 90 minutes actually count, you need to create what's known as the tunnel of work. Here are the specific environmental and biological tweaks to really lock your brain in. First, try fasting until noon. This mildly elevates adrenaline, which gives you a heightened ability to focus and encode information. Next, physically position your screen at eye level or even slightly higher. Looking down physically signals your brain to become sleepy. Then add some low-level white noise to optimize your brain for learning. And finally, turn your phone completely off. Not on airplane mode, not on do not disturb. Off. This is what creates a state of truly dangerous productivity.
But as you execute, you are inevitably going to have to decide what not to do. And this brings us to a pretty harsh but totally necessary truth. Correct prioritization should actually feel kind of bad. Yeah, you heard that right. If prioritizing feels perfectly fine and easy, you probably aren't actually prioritizing. To get those high-leverage results, you have to actively look at things you genuinely want to do, or even things that seem really important, and explicitly say no to them. It's the performance paradox. Choosing to do less of the busy work is exactly what allows you to achieve the highest possible output in your focus blocks.
So, what does this all mean? We've covered the mechanics of the external brain, the traps of over-engineering it, and the neuroscience of deep execution. Now, it is entirely on you. What is the one mental tab you are going to close today? I challenge you right now to grab a piece of paper, write that nagging task down, get it out of your mental RAM, and finally reclaim your peace of mind. Until next time, stay focused.